If you have a true scary story, be it a glitch in the Matrix or not, consider sending it my way. Go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I've been listening to your podcast for a few months now, and I wanted to share something that has happened to me now a few times. I don't know if this is a glitch or if my brain was causing me to hallucinate, but to the best of my knowledge, I am healthy and there wouldn't be anything to cause me to hallucinate long term like this. I live in a suburb that has a lot of foot and public transit traffic. It's a fairly nice area with a lot of rentals, which is why I live here. This started about 6 months ago. I was walking home from my late night shift at a warehouse that I work for. It was around 2 in the morning. I was walking with my earphones in, staring at the sidewalk, and looked up towards an intersection nearby when I saw a bus. It was your standard city bus, just idling on the side of the road. But it was 2 in the morning. The buses stopped running around midnight. I watched the bus just sit there for a moment thinking that something was wrong with it. When I looked down at my phone to pause my music, and then looked back up, the bus was gone. It was there one moment and literally gone the next. I stood there thinking that I was just way too tired to be dealing with it, thinking it was like a waking dream kind of thing, and just kept going, deciding to not let it get to me. But then, when I was most of the way home, I saw another bus idling at the corner past where I lived. It was just sitting there, not moving, no turn signal or anything. It had on its headlights, but that was it. I was a bit unnerved by it, so I went inside and just pretended like it wasn't there. Over the last 6 months, I have seen buses sitting idly at random spots way after the buses are no longer running, around 2 in the morning. I keep randomly seeing them on the road near my home or in various places on the walk, and I swear they disappear when I notice them. They don't poof disappear. They typically disappear when I look away or blink. They are always the same bus. Standard city bus, no discerning marks, no lit numbers or anything. They're just your standard everyday bus. Now, I did something that most people don't do. I decided to confront my glitch, after working up the courage for 6 months. I was walking home about 2 weeks ago, and I saw a bus in the same place that I saw it the first time, which was a pretty common spot for me to see the buses over the last 6 months. I decided I was going to physically confront the bus. I would walk towards it, not take my eyes off of it, and I would physically touch the bus. I wanted to make absolutely sure that this bus was real and that I wasn't going absolutely mental and seeing things. So, I held my eyes open, walked to the bus, and looked in. And much to my surprise, there was a man sitting in the driver's seat on his cell phone. Much to my surprise, I blinked, and the bus didn't disappear. It was still there. I stepped up to the front door, and the driver looked over at me and saw me and gave me a friendly smile. He then opened the door and looked at me and said, "Hey, sorry, we're done for the night. I was having some engine trouble, so I'm waiting for a tow truck to get me back to the depot." I just kind of nodded and said thank you, and we both turned away to get back to whatever we were doing. As I turned away, I reached my hand out and physically touched the bus to make sure that it was real and not in my mind. And it was very real. So, the one time I went to confront this oddity that kept happening over and over randomly over the last 6 months, it was real. This one time, it was a real bus. It didn't disappear, and it was physically there, complete with a reason to be there and a driver. It makes me wonder if any of the other times I saw a bus, if I had chosen to approach it, would it have stayed and been real? Would those buses have been actual buses? Or were they glitches / fake / out of place in this existence? As I said, it's been 2 weeks since this happened, and I haven't seen the buses since. There haven't been any odd buses in places where they shouldn't be. The ones that I have seen have been at normal times, and they don't disappear when I look away. I don't know what this was. I don't know if this was a series of the most impossible coincidences over half a year, but that's where it all ended. That's how it all came to its conclusion. I saw a real bus. I approached this real bus. And I guess that set things into the right way. I honestly have no idea. I don't remember exactly when this happened, but I know I was in my late teens. At the time, my family didn't have much money, so we would often go to thrift stores when we needed clothes or something like that. During one trip to the thrift store, I found an enormous bag of mixed postage stamps. Many of the stamps were still on envelope corners, some had been removed from the envelopes entirely. There were probably hundreds of stamps that had been stuffed into this plastic bag, which was then stapled shut and being sold for $1 to $2. This was before thrift stores checked eBay pricing for information, so things were usually really cheap. On a previous trip to the thrift store, I had picked up a stamp album, which had some stamps already posted in it, and I thought I would be able to fill up some of the pages with the stamps in the bag, so I bought the bag after cajoling my mother for the money. When we got home, I put the bag away and forgot about them for a bit. I think I was busy with school or something. I eventually remembered the stamps and decided I was going to sort them out and see what I had. So I pulled out my album and the big bag of stamps. I also had some glycerin envelopes. Glycerin looks like wax paper, but isn't. It's often used in stamp collecting because the paper is acid-free and won't damage the stamps. It's to help sort the stamps. I labeled the envelopes in pencil with different categories like USA, West Germany, USSR, Rhodesia, etc. Because some of these stamps were a few decades old, while some were brand new. One of the envelopes was labeled with something like special. And this is where I put stamps that were of extra interest to me. For instance, a space stamp. An especially old stamp or a stamp with gold foil on it might go into this envelope for me to look at later. Anyway, I didn't have a suitable table for my sorting activities, so I sat cross-legged on the floor and carefully spread out my acquisitions. These special envelopes sat on one knee while the other envelopes around me in small piles as I slowly sorted through the bag. About halfway through the bag, I found a stamp that I thought was interesting. I don't remember if it was from a country that I hadn't heard of before, or if it was really pretty or what. I reached for the special envelope to put the stamp in there, and it was just gone. Thinking it had simply fallen off my leg, I looked under my knee. Then I looked under my other knee. I stood up and looked all around where I had been sitting. There was no special envelope. I sat back down and figured maybe I had just put it in the stack of other glycerin envelopes. I put the stamp down, picked up the small stack of envelopes, and started sorting through it. No special envelope. I asked my mother to come look and help me find the envelope. We looked again and it was just not there. I was disappointed and frustrated because there were some really nice stamps in there. I don't think they were worth anything, but I thought that they were interesting. Eventually, I gathered everything up and put the half-sorted stamps away, intending to deal with them later. But I don't ever remember going back to the stamps after that. It was like once that envelope vanished, there was no point. The whole thing kind of creeped me out a bit too, but this was long before I had ever heard of Glitch in the Matrix stuff happening. We wound up moving out of that house a couple of years later, and the missing glassine envelopes never turned up as we emptied the house. Also, my entire stamp collection vanished during the move. I never saw the thrift store bag or the album in the new house. They weren't thrown in the trash because nobody would have done that without asking me. Nobody sold the collection either because they were all pretty worthless stamps. Essentially just colorful pieces of paper. I still do wonder what happened to my collection, but especially what happened to that one envelope that vanished by itself. A few years back, there was a solar eclipse visible in New England. I had moved away long ago, about 10 years at least, living out of state, and was back in the general area and decided I would check it out from a park nearby where I was staying. I also bought some of those eclipse glasses that convenience stores sell for $5. I didn't know anyone at all personally where I was staying or even in the state outside my family and my friends were long moved away. The park was about the size of a professional basketball court, not big, and only grass covering an open field. There were probably 6 or 7 other people too, either sitting down or standing or hanging out because of the eclipse. The eclipse event was not as dramatic as I assumed it would be, and it got dark barely. Although cool nonetheless. In total, myself and the other people were there for about an hour. When the eclipse was basically over, I started walking away out of the park, and as I was walking, I was headed towards 2 people, a man and a woman that were sitting down, and I thought to myself, I'll give my eclipse glasses to them. I'm not going to need them anymore, as they didn't have any. I approached them and said, "Hi, I'm leaving, and you can have these if you want." The man then turned towards me and said, "No thanks, David." I got an immediate feeling of fear and confusion. Paused for a second, but said nothing. They said nothing and kept walking. These 2 people were nobody that I recognized, as well as being probably in their 50s, myself 30. So they were way too old to be anybody that I would know or anybody that would know me. But also, they never waved while I was in the park or even acknowledged me if they did know me. As I was walking towards them 20 feet away, 10, 5 feet. They also didn't have eclipse glasses, which were definitely necessary, yet they were staring straight at the sun. There was no reason to think anybody from some kind of law enforcement was following me, and I wasn't in any trouble in any way. The area itself was not my hometown either. The spookiness was how confidently they knew who I was. Yet, had I never said anything about giving them the glasses, they never would have acknowledged me. I've run into people before who I don't initially recognize, and their attitude is the same. More sociable. At least follow-up statements or questions like, "Haven't seen you in a while," or something other than deliberate creepiness. Today, I meet new clients for work all the time, and in my social life, meet new people very often. And even if I can't remember their name, I'll at least recognize them. I still occasionally rack my brain, and have just instead decided to consider it a paranormal encounter. Maybe something supernatural. Myself from the future, maybe? Or just a glitch in the Matrix of some kind. Big fan of your YouTube channel. Thanks for doing this. I know it helps a lot of people out that go through these odd situations. Anyhow, let me get to my story. I'm 35 now, but this happened when I was in my early 20s. I was going through a bit of a rough patch at the time, as I've had many in my life, and I will share more in the future with your approval, of course. I approve. But back to my story. I was having a long week. I don't recall the exact details, but I'll try to put in as much detail as possible. So, being in my early 20s, I was going through a rough time with my now ex-girlfriend. I was between jobs, and of course, there were troubles at home. One day, towards the end of the week, I saw a flyer for a car show in Las Vegas, and said to myself, why not? Being a Thursday, I'll work on my '63 Chevy truck tonight, and leave early Friday. Being that I live in San Fernando and Las Vegas is about a 4-hour drive, and me being an older truck, it's going to take me much longer. But it didn't really matter. I felt like I needed some time for myself, so I got to work, got done early, packed up some clothes for the weekend, maybe a bit longer. I wasn't sure. I always had my tools in my vehicle, and yes, my profession is that I'm a mechanic. Anyhow, I'm tired and I plan to leave early, and as far as I can remember, I've been to Vegas many times, as I was the youngest and my family, mainly grandparents, always found a way to take me. But that's a long story in itself, and I won't get into it today. So, Friday morning, I printed out the map from MapQuest, and yes, I feel a little old just now saying that. You have to remember, when all this happened, it was over 13 years ago, and phones have come a long way since then. So I gas up, hit the road. About an hour and a half, I finally hit the desert area, and I'm excited. I'm cruising along in deep thoughts at times while I have my music in the background. It's a mixed CD that had everything from Bad Religion to Flux of Pink Indians, MDC, The Causalities, etc. I would keep going, but it was a lot of different bands. I'm coming up to Barstow. I fuel up again, grab some snacks, and a couple of regular drinks. Not beer or anything like that. I get back to the road, getting towards Baker's. Something started to feel funny when I was driving, so just out of curiosity, I took the next exit, cruised down the off-ramp, made a right, and chugged a little down the road. I pulled into a vintage-looking gas station, and before I knew it, I have 2 service guys in old-style work jumpsuits coming out and asking what they can do for me. And I happened to ask, were they filming a movie nearby? The 2 men looked at me and said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of you, just go inside and we'll do the rest." I was thinking that something seemed very off. People are never that nice, and I've never seen this place before, and I've been on this highway more times than I could count. I was trying not to freak anyone out. I just said, "Yeah, fill her up," and walked inside to grab a Coke. They were all in glass bottles, so I was like, cool. I grabbed a couple, got some beef jerky and smokes. I was a smoker then, but I would actually quit that same weekend. I get up to the front counter and ask for the smokes, and the gentleman said, "Those are gonna kill you one day," and then asked if that was my truck outside. I said yeah, that I'd had it for a while now and that I'd been slowly fixing it up here and there when I can. And at that moment, he had the most confused look on his face, and stood there completely still for a minute and then asked what year it was. I said it was a '63 Chevy C10. He replied, "How much did you pay for it?" I responded and said that I paid $250 for my friend's dad. After that, he gave another long pause, and then said, "I think you paid too much for it." And then he asked me if I was headed to Vegas for work. I asked how he knew that I was headed towards Vegas, and he said in a toned voice, "Well, you're young, and you have alligator hands." I've never heard that before, but I found out later that it means I have tough-looking work hands. But back to his answer. He was like, "You have your work hands, you drive a truck, and you have a bag full of clothes, so I would guess that you want to start somewhere new or you're looking for work." I kindly just told him that I had a lot on my mind and was just going to get away for the weekend, and handed him $40 thinking that would cover my gas and drinks and smokes. But he handed me back $120 and about $10-ish, but in $2 bills and pocket change. I didn't actually catch what the bills were at that moment, but I still have at least one of those bills to this day. I head out the front door to my truck, and the attendants hand me my keys and again say, "Wow, nice truck. And then they tell me they checked the air pressure and topped off my oil and something was loose, but not to worry because they took care of it. So I get in the truck, start it up, and the radio at that moment was acting funny, so I kind of just shrugged it off, still thinking of the strange talk I had with the man at the counter. I put the truck in gear and take off, headed back toward the freeway on-ramp, and I get on to see that there were no cars. I was like, wow, what are the odds? That was way too easy to get back on the freeway. But after that, I didn't think much of it, so I continued driving, but then realized the sun was going down. Then, suddenly my radio started playing again, but not the mixed CD that I had in the CD player. It was now a mix of Frank Sinatra, Count 5, and some other bands of the late 50s and early 60s. Then the radio host said it was 15 minutes to 7 p.m., and I was like, how the F did that happen? I left at 5 in the morning. How is it going to be 7 at night? That's impossible. I kept driving, hit the strip as the sun was going down, and I decided to try the first casino. At the time, that was the Flamingo. So I get there, park, lock up. I'm walking to the front entrance, and I get to the front desk and gave my ID, and I was about to ask to see if they had any rooms available. But before I get to that, I hear, "We've been expecting you," which was impossible. Everything was a spur-of-the-moment trip. No plans, no reservations, no nothing. So I told them to double-check, and sure enough, they had all of my information. The lady at the desk handed me a room key and told me how to get there. So I went back to my truck and grabbed my stuff, and then headed back up to my room, which I hadn't seen yet, but it happened to be one of the nicest rooms I had seen in a long time. Basically a full-on mini apartment. So I headed back down and asked if I was in the right room, as there was no way that I could afford it. She kindly said, "Nope, that's yours. It's already paid for, so there shouldn't be anything to worry about." Suddenly, someone tapped on my shoulder and said, "Here's your Coke and whiskey," which is my drink of choice, but I hadn't ordered one yet. So I grabbed it out of common curiosity. I thanked the clerk again and decided to just go walk around, and yes, I did drink a little that night, but nothing crazy. I never blacked out. I did run into a couple of my buddies that I had no idea were going to be there. The night goes on. I call it at about 2 in the morning. I get back and I suddenly knocked out as soon as I hit the bed. Then I wake up to room service knocking about 8 in the morning, bringing me my breakfast that I didn't order, but I took it, and ate it anyways. I went on spending about a couple of days there, then headed home, expecting to see that gas station that I had run into on my way, but to no avail. It's a rundown ghost gas station that hasn't been open since the late 60s. I couldn't get my head around it, so I drove the rest of the way home, stopping when needed, but to this very day, I cannot for the life of me figure out what happened, or why it happened. I would like to hear some of your thoughts on what I can make of this. Sorry for it being so long, but that's as much as I can remember, and if any questions are asked, I will answer them the best that I can. Thank you, Raven, for doing what you do. It is nice to hear these stories. Reading stuff like that doesn't make me feel so crazy over my random life experiences. Hello again, Raven. This is my second submission to your channel. In June of this year, I started having glitches/time slip moments out of the blue, and I've been stuck on your channel ever since. I've been trying to pinpoint exactly why my experiences started in the month of June, but I'm still not sure if there's any significance. Well, I did get broken up with, and it was a very difficult breakup to go through, which caused me a ton of mental stress. But I'm not sure if that's why my experiences started occurring. Okay, so I've been putting off submitting this story for a few weeks now. because it sounds so insane, even to me. I've only shared it with one other person who I knew would not judge me or think that I was losing my mind. I'm a 30-year-old female and I am a truck driver. I drove to St. Louis, Missouri to pick up my next load, and when I arrived, my load wasn't ready yet and wouldn't be ready until the next afternoon. So I ended up having to park for the day and just wait it out. The area that I was in was very sketchy, but I was forced to park in this particular area because St. Louis is scarce when it comes to truck stops. So I found a small gas station with a small dirt lot for truck parking. I parked, stayed put in the driver's seat of my semi, and scrolled on my phone for a bit just to pass time. I immediately noticed there was a silver Suburban parked to my right. Being a female truck driver, I am very observant of my surroundings at all times. I've been in weird situations. I intently studied the silver Suburban and the driver inside. The driver was a white male, looked to be no more than 25 years old. He was wearing dark shades, was clean-shaven, thin frame, and had on a blue collared shirt. I watched the guy for a minute, just wondering what he was doing randomly parked in the dirt lot for trucks, and made a mental note of his description. I do this everywhere I park for my own safety. I watched as he scrolled on a large tablet as he sat in the driver's seat. I specifically remember thinking to myself, I wonder why he's using such a large tablet instead of a cell phone. Not my business, but I was still curious. After observing the guy in the vehicle, I glanced at my phone to read a message. I then looked back over at the guy in the silver Suburban, and this time he looks older. He now looks to be around 50 years old, no younger. I also noticed that he was bulkier now. I specifically remember the guy that I had previously observed being a much thinner guy, and he didn't look muscular at all. He still had on dark shades and the same blue-collared shirt that I vividly remember from my first observation. But I immediately noticed that he had a full beard now, and he's also scrolling on a cell phone instead of a tablet. The guy that I was intently watching before was clean-shaven and looked very young. He didn't look a day over 25. At this point, I'm sure that my eyes had to be the size of 2 golf balls, and my mouth was wide open, because I was in shock. The guy looked over at me, probably wondering why I'm just staring at him and looking like a crazy person, but he gives me a big smile and waves at me. I nervously give a wave and quickly turn my head in confusion. I sat there trying to figure out what even happened and how. How was I now seeing an older version of the same exact guy in the blink of an eye? And I'm still not understanding the tablets to cell phone situation. I specifically remember him scrolling on a very large tablet. I don't know, maybe he switched over to his cell phone when I looked down to read the message on my phone, but I still have absolutely no explanation for a full beard out of nowhere, and him being bulky instead of skinny. I told this experience to a close friend of mine, the only person I trust to share my experiences with other than this channel. She asked me a question that gave me chills. She asks, "So, which timeline do you think is your current timeline? The one where you saw the younger guy, or the one with the older version of the guy?" I'm not sure why that question freaked me out so much, but it instantly sent me into a state of confusion and paranoia that I cannot explain. Which timeline is my current timeline? Am I supposed to be on this timeline? Did I jump to another reality and get stuck there? The guy stayed parked next to me for another 30 minutes or so. I never looked back over at him again, fearing that he would somehow change again if I did. He eventually pulls off, but I was confused for the rest of the day, and I still am. I've had 3 other unexplainable experiences since then. 2 involving people literally disappearing right before my eyes and teleporting to another spot. I'll try to get around to submitting those as well. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading and sharing my experience. This is the only place that doesn't make me feel like I'm going completely insane. First off, Raven, your podcast helps my creative outlet. I love your podcast and so does my sister. Oh, thank you very much. Anyway, this started about a year ago when I first moved into my current home. My glitches started small. My ring's color changing, a window being closed when I had just opened it, and little things like that. When I had just got my new bedroom after my parents and grandma had finished building it, I had put my guitar in the corner next to my bed. I had gone upstairs for dinner. My grandma and my little sister had left for their grandma date an hour prior. My parents and I were all upstairs. After dinner, I went downstairs to finish moving in, and my guitar was back in its box. My bedroom is next to the crawl space, but it's boarded up, so nothing could have put it in the box. I do have a cat, but she's small, and even if she wanted to, she could not have put it back in that box. Hey Raven, I just recently found your podcast and I love it. My story is short and sweet. I will preface by saying that I do tend to lose things more often than any 31-year-old woman should. My husband, for Christmas, a few years ago, got me a pair of AirPods. I use them every night to fall asleep as I like listening to podcasts. One morning I woke up and did the normal thing of putting my AirPods back in their charger. Well, I was able to locate the right AirPod, but the left was missing. I tore the bed apart looking for it, but it was just gone. Defeated, I just assumed it was gone forever. I wasn't even able to find it with the location. Flash forward about 2 weeks from the time I lost it, I was lying in bed and stuck my arm under my pillow and felt something. To my surprise, it was my missing AirPod. Shocked, I thanked the universe for giving it back. So that, my friends, was this week's glitch in the Matrix collection. A collection of weird and bizarre stories that will have you feeling out of place in this simulation, that will have you potentially vibrating your way out of your place in this matrix. Recoding your 1s and 0s into 2s and 4s, maybe. I don't know what that would be called. Would it still be a binary language if it's just 2s and 4s? Because it's just two numbers. Huh. And yes, I know that's not how binary works. Binary is on-off. That's why it's 0-1, open-closed kind of thing. But, I mean, in theory, couldn't you just replace the variables in binary with 2 and 4, 2 being closed, 1 being open, or 4 being open? See, I can't even say it right. I can't even say the wrong thing right because I'm confusing myself because I know the right thing. Anyways, whatever. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. I did. They were great. Some weird ones this time around. For some reason, this time around, 3 of them were involved... Sorry, not 3 of them were. 3 of them involved vehicles or driving or something along the line. Something that happened in the vehicles. Last time it was pets. This time it's vehicles. I don't know how this happens. I sort these semi-randomly. Like I've mentioned before. It depends on how long the story is and when I receive it. If I receive a bunch of stories at the same time, I tend to put them in the same collection. Though sometimes I shuffle them around based on length to try to keep the videos around half an hour. And yeah, motor vehicles is the theme of this one apparently, so I don't know. It happens somehow. Yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that like button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you want early access to content like this, go to Patreon or memberships to get early access to content, like this, like I just said. Everyone's getting this early that's over there because whenever you guys hear this tomorrow, Monday, today, Monday technically, but tomorrow for me now, I'll be on vacation. I'm going on vacation for 2 days. Patience and I are going to Branson. Going to spend 2 days out there. So I'll be back on Tuesday night, though. So don't worry. Content will continue. I've already got Tuesday's video done. This is Monday's video. Did it a little backwards. And then Tuesday night, whenever I get home, I might work on Wednesdays, or I'll just do it on Wednesday. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, Patreon memberships, early access content like this. You can also do a super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel. Never expected, always appreciated. You can also listen on other platforms, such as Spotify, or Apple, or Audible, or Amazon Music. And yeah. Since I happened to already derail my train of thought, let's move on to the word of the week. On the screen right now is the collection of all the people who submitted their comments who submitted their comments for last week's word of the week. Those of you who did submit on the screen right now, thank you so very much. If any of you were missed, please tell me, slap me on the back of the head angrily, just yell at me. I don't care. It doesn't really matter. Just yell at me. My point. Ping me and say, hey, you missed mine. I try not to miss any of them, but I am human. I miss them. I'm not the most organized person in the world, but anyways. This is the collection. I'm pretty sure I got them all. If not, sorry. Once more, thank you to everyone who is on the screen right now who did leave me a comment. You all are amazing and go above and beyond to push these videos further into the system, the algorithm, if you will. So again, thank you. If you didn't leave a comment, that's totally okay. I understand and never expect anyone to. So, now, moving on to this week's word of the week. Somebody mentioned they thought I said absurd last week. So this week, the word of the week is absurd. Absurd is spelled A-B-S-U-R-D. It means ridiculously unreasonable, unsound, or incongruous, having no rationale or orderly relationship to human life, or lacking order or value. And yes, on the definition that's on the screen, I misspelled ridiculously. I spelled it ridiculously. I'm not going to fix it. I embrace my mistakes, so that's what it is. Use absurd in a comment, get featured next week. That's how we do things around here. Thank you to everyone who listened to this point. You all are amazing. Dare I say, you are loved, you are valid, you are important. You are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love. Sleep well.